morning, hot morning. I thought we'd change it up and start over here because it's going to be hot. Why set in the barn for 2 hours? Or we're not going to, unless you guys have lots of questions, we're probably not going to be the full 2 hours. But we will see where it goes. So this presentation is titled Classification of Dexter Cattle, but as I was putting it together, I realized we probably ought to just start talking about conformation of Dexter cattle, and as that leads into something maybe like classification, we'll see where it goes. How many of you ever had your cattle classified under the system that we had 12 years ago? Good. It's not, so yeah, we had 3, and we did as well, so that's not too bad. So there is some familiarity in the room with what classification is, but we're going to start out with just talking about confirmation. So I've learned that because of my somewhat scattered thought process that I need to lay out some objectives for myself, and I hope these will help you as well. So I want to talk about what is classification, but again, what is confirmation? How is classification done? We're going to do some Dexters, have a couple over there that will walk through the classification confirmation guidelines. Why is classification beneficial? And then I want to have some time where we can just talk about what all this means, what it means for the future, and where we can go with something like our confirmation guide classification as we move forward as an association. So some definitions. Classification is the measure of an animal's conformation on multiple traits with an emphasis on functionality, ability to produce, and breed type. So I guess this sets a little bit apart from what some folks might say, well, we're looking for a show animal. This doesn't really take into account anything related to the animal other than how those traits that are identified in the breed guideline match up with what the association and the breed has identified as what a Dexter should look like. And what a Dexter look like is based upon traits that lead to the most functional cattle that we can produce. And then breed type. Is everyone familiar what breed type refers to? Anyone want to? So, you know, every breed has some traits that are kind of particular to it, and that's often what is referred to as breed type. So, you know, some of the things that are breed type of a Dexter are obviously it's smaller of stature. It's to look like, according to the confirmation guidelines, a dual-purpose animal, and that's kind of a breed type in some respects, but there's also some linear traits that indicate that as well. And then things like the shape, the dish shape of the face, the wide rod muzzle and wide eyelids set widely apart. Those are breed type points or traits. They don't particularly, in most cases, relate to a functionality, but they do indicate that those traits are particularly associated with this specific breed. And those also are included in the confirmation guide and classification. How many of you have seen the confirmation guide that's available on the ADCA website? Those of you that know, okay, those of you that haven't, have you looked for it? We're gonna with our new website, I think that's gonna be much easier to access. And what's that? It's not easy to find, but the information that I handed out to you is based on the ADCA's confirmation guide, which is available on the association's website. It's under the education tab, and then you go to confirmation. So write that down. If you take nothing else away from here, take that, and when you get home, print out a copy of that, and hopefully you can study it. Well, hi, Stephanie. Glad you joined us. For those of you that don't have handouts, So please take a look at that confirmation guide. That is, in effect, if you're breeding Dexter cattle, in my mind, that confirmation guide that's presented by the association is your blueprint for what you want your Dexters to be. I mean, it's never that simple, obviously, and to get there, it's incredibly challenging and difficult and fun, and that's why we do it. But use that confirmation guideline as your blueprint for this is how I want my Dexters to look when they're functionally correct, when they exhibit the appropriate breed type. All right, so a classification system is, we just added system to the word, and in my mind what that means is we formalize that confirmation guide into the classification system. Linear classification is, linear refers to a scale from 1 to 9, and you'll see that on your handout. But what a classification system is, a recorded measure of cattle confirmation of breed type by, and this is key, an objective, independent, trained professional through a breed organization. And that makes it a system in my mind. If we're all doing our own confirmation guides and walking through the classification, we all have our own information. We all know what that is. No one else knows what that is. What value of that is that to the breed unless that's somehow shared and systematized across the entire association. So everyone knows where the breed is on this particular trait or in this area, where we need to go, where we have weaknesses, and where we have strengths that we need to build upon. So that, in my mind, makes it a system as opposed to just everyone doing their own classification. I had a slide on here that I took off because I didn't know how formal we were going to be. Hopefully we can loosen up here in a little bit. But I had a farmer in his overalls that kind of looked like me, bald head. Over here, pitchfork in hand, the most atrocious looking animal, I don't think it was a Dexter, cow on this side, and a thought bubble going up to his head that said, "Isn't she a beauty?" And then we have a guy in a lab coat representing the professional technician looking at her and saying, "Yes, she is something." So that gets to, and someone might know this, I've always said barn sighted, but I think it's barn sighted. Who knows the correct?
Barn blind.
Barn blind.
Yeah, cited would be, yeah.
But I've always heard barn sighted. So barn blind. Barn blind means you have a hard, in my mind, has a hard time seeing the faults in your own stuff, where other people walk up and go, "Oh my goodness." And we all have that. All our kids are the smartest kids we've ever had in the world. All our kids are the best. I mean, that's the same thing. Those that have pets, your dog's always the best. It's just human nature. We look at the things that are ours, and it's more difficult for us to critically evaluate. And that's the advantage of having someone that comes into your farm and says, "I'm here to look at your cattle and tell you what you have. I don't care that that cow is your favorite. I don't know that that cow is your daughter's favorite. It doesn't enter into my calculation." That, to me, has a tremendous benefit. That, getting honest opinion on our cattle is incredibly valuable. And it's not easy to get. I mean, it's hard. People ask me, what's this, I like to think of myself as a fairly kind person. I don't want to offend someone. I don't want to make someone feel bad about something they've obviously got a lot of pride and enjoyment in. But when you have someone that doesn't have that relationship with you and you're able to ask them about, "Tell me what you think of this cow," and they can give you an honest opinion, that is an incredibly valuable bit of information for you and your herd and your breeding program. I mean, am I wrong? On social, yes, Stephanie.
A couple things. One is I've gone through and classified my own so I can pull. And I usually do with my mom. And when I go through and classify, I always cover up the point score. If you have those heart strings, you're going
so
second thing is if I have people come out to buy something, they come out to pick it up, and they come out to look at them, if they want to spend some time with me, I'll hand them this. And as they go out in the herd and pick something good about it, and then I say, be careful, because it's going to depend on what you pay when you leave here. But they, it's people that don't know anything, really, about confirmations, and they just think it's so cool to go out and go through this, to know what they're looking for, and they look at me and go, oh, I got it wrong.
yeah, it is incredibly valuable to have that honest opinion. And as an association, as a breed, a personal opinion, I think we need more of that as a breed. We need to be able to thicken our skin a little bit more and say, this is this is that. All right, lots of more definitions here. This is exactly out of the ADCA, the American Dexter Cattle Association in 2007 did implement a linear classification system, thanks in large part to our own Patty Adams, who's here today. She led that committee. Pat, I think you were on it. I was on it. So there were several of us still around that helped with our initial classification system. But I'm not going to run through all that definition, but I think the key point is the first one there. Linear classification is an evaluation system used throughout the world and widely accepted as the most accurate method of functional type assessment for livestock. Now I know many of you, some of you were here for Matt Spangler's presentation yesterday afternoon. I wish this could have followed his presentation. He's a genetics guy from UNL. And he was talking about, as we're going through breeding our cattle, he had on one side the value of the information on an arrow going up, and he started out with basically phenotypic examination of your animal, which is classification. He started out with that, and then multiple different levels. Production testing was in there, and then at the very top was genetic mapping. So all that is information that can be used to help you breed better cattle and move your herd forward in the production goals you want. But as you go further up that to the genetic mapping, the cost increase greatly. So production testing, we've talked about it for a long time in the ADCA, but the practical reality of it is that many of us don't have the herd sizes or the systems in place, or even the ability or the desire to do all the measurement of production testing that's needed, particularly on the dairy side. We're doing better on the beef side. So that's in the middle, but then on the bottom, basically at where you start in that foundation of assessing where you're going with your cattle is phenotypic examination, classification. Look at the animal. What does it tell you in terms of its functional traits? So that's where we're at, in large part, with our breed. We still need to do that level of information as we're increasing our production information on the beef side in particular. And then we're doing some with genomics, but not quite as much, or nearly as much. Okay, so just briefly, how does the classification work? You have the classification or a portion of the classification guide in front of you. It also has above it the confirmation guide. The only difference between the confirmation guide and the classification system is, as Stephanie suggested, their numbers are removed. You still have the ideal range. It's just the scale is gone. That instrument is used by whoever the classifiers are. They come to your farm. You have your cattle ready to be assessed. There are some eligibility requirements for what type of animal can be classified. They have to be at least 2 years of age and have freshened. So they have to be a cow in milk. So your 5-year-old cow that's dry is not eligible for classification. I'm trying to remember, and I don't, you remember right offhand, Patty, the age for bulls? Was it 12, was it a year? Yeah, I think bulls were 2 years old at least as well. Yeah. So this isn't for heifers. This isn't for yearling bulls. This is for animals that are approaching their mature type. So the classifier will come to your farm. You have your animals available. They don't all have to be halter trained. Sometimes that would help. But they have to be in a place where you can effectively, ideally on a smooth ground, ideally hard ground, where they can see the foot and the hooves. And also not in a group, so you need to be able to see each individual animal. So maybe passing them through a squeeze or something like that, walking them in a lot by themselves. That type of situation is needed for this type of system because you can't really do this when you're looking at 4 or 5 animals, 6, 7 animals all together moving around. The classifier has what you have in your hands, or you provide it to them when they arrive and say, here's my form. The information should already be filled out or is filled out in terms of what herd, who am I, contact information, number of animals, names of animals, and all that. And then he or she will walk through and classify each one of your animals that meets your eligibility criteria. And depending upon the system that is used, he will either send those into the association or provide them to you to send them to the association. Those are issues that, however it's developed, need to be determined at some point. But the information is made available to you at some level to then use in your herd going forward. Yes, Linda?
So, you said we have to be at least 2. Our cows are so long-lived. How far out there then do you go at the other end?
So Linda asked a question. The Dexters are such a long longevity, they live such a long time, that how far out on the other end do you go? And I think that's an excellent question, and I think that's kind of a reason why we ought to be doing some more classification. We ought to be classifying 15-year-old cows and see how they are stacking up from where they were at when they were 4. And then when we do that, or a 20-year-old.
She still can.
Yeah. So, and then be able to say, as a breed and as an association, we classified this number of animals at their second freshening. This is where they were at in terms of their traits. This is where they were at 15 years later. That would be an impressive bit of marketing for a breed. But you have to have the information to do that. Matt Spangler also said, you manage what's measured. And we're not doing that as well as we should, I think, as a breed. We need to do more measurement and manage off of that data. But that's an excellent point. But I didn't answer your question. I don't think there's a set range on the age limit. There's no age limit on the upper side for when this is applicable to any age, as long as they're fresh. The females are fresh. Yes, Lisa.
Yeah, exactly.
How
And
brave are you?
Yeah. Because a 3-year-old isn't going to come in the same category. Well, let me reverse that. A 15-year-old isn't going to classify as well as she did when she was 3 or 4.
In most cases, no. In most cases, no.
Right,
but
exactly.
in most cases, no. But you'll know where the differences are over that time, and those traits that don't change that much over that period of time, you've got something there.
Yeah.
And if you've got 3 or 4 generations behind that cow that you're still wishy-washy on what I'm going to do with, that gives you a lot of information on what you're going to do with those.
Set your baseline for you on your coup.
Say again, Ryan?
So that would set your baseline, if you had that info, that would set your baseline to grade kind of on a curve the older the cow gets.
Exactly. So Ryan was said that sets that. I'm getting it. Ryan says that sets the baseline for where you're at, and then you were saying that you would look at that cow over time and its progeny in comparison to that. So, Lisa, did you have a question? Do we want to share?
Yes.
Right, so, right, so the question from Lisa was how often do you do that, and Patty was relaying what some of another breed, the Brown Swiss, that do classification have done so for quite some time. They like to do it the first or second lactation, 3 or 4 years after that, and then as a more elderly cow later, and then to be able to look at that, the comparison of the linear traits and in terms of production value, that as a dairy breed, the Brown Swiss are collected, and see how that works together. So those are issues, though, that individual herds and individual associations that do this can make their own minds up about. How often would a Dexter association choose or recommend that Dexters be classified? Those are things that need to be answered and thought about and worked through. Okay, getting more into the classification system itself. So this is based on what the ADCA put together in 2007. These percentages could change depending on what breed you're in. I know most dairy breeds, the female mammary system in some of them, I think maybe all of them, is 50% of the score. As a dual purpose breed, I don't think we want 50% of our, but we certainly want a good chunk of it. We are a dual purpose breed. So I think that reflects this. So the scoring, that linear score along the bottom, 1 to 9, those are added up in each of these areas. Form and substance, and we'll go through what's in that in a minute. That's 50% of all those points you see on the bottom there. The mobility, the movement, how functional they are in their walk and gait and moving around. The udder traits are 25%. And then for the bulls, the reproductive system traits are 25% of the score. And this is some of the things that are in each of those areas. So form and substance has a lot of stuff in it. I mean, it is key. It's 50% of what we're looking at in terms of this linear scoring system. But all these things need to be looked at as a confirmation through the confirmation guide lens. So stature. We are a small breed, and the breed does have guidelines. In Stephanie's discussion yesterday, we talked about the difference between guidelines and standards. The ADCA has guidelines for height. It's recommended. It's what we'd like to see. It doesn't mean they're not a Dexter, and it doesn't mean you can't register them, but it's a guideline. So that's our stature, chest width. And we'll go through each of these as we get out with an animal, and we can go through the form itself here in a bit. And why don't we just do that now? Does everyone have one? So this confirmation guide goes through. The confirmation guide goes through in the same order as it's on the screen here. So you see the guidelines there for the height. And I left my stick in the other room. All you Dexter owners have the little height scale sticks. We'll show you one here in a little bit. They're kind of handy. I think if they painted them another color besides silver, the cows wouldn't be quite so spooked by them. I'm gonna try black, I think, and see if we. So chest width, you see on there's an image there, and we'll go through these with a cow to make it more real. But you can see the chest width, and we'll follow through with these. Body depth, it's like, that's the first thing I look at when I look at a cow. How deep is it? Rarely do I look at anything else if it's not what I want to see in the depth. Because to me, that depth indicates how well that cow is going to consume a huge quantity of forage, get it in its system, process it, digest it, and use that to produce meat and milk. If it's a narrow, not deep, get all the organs, the heart, the lungs, the stomachs. You gotta have some room for all that. And you don't want them feeling pinched and not comfortable, and the more they can get into that huge fat to ferment and turn into proteins and meat, the better. So that's one indicator that I like to focus on, but it's just one in this entire array of traits that we want to look at. Ribs and bone, how well sprung the animals are, the shape of the ribs. Muscling. Now I added the images in here to the confirmation guide that's on the ADCA's website because we didn't have those on there yet, and I'm not sure. And we didn't have them on the original classification system either for images. So those, and this entire document is my document. It's not approved by the ADCA, so this is my document, copied from the confirmation guide on the website. So any changes in this are mine. So I found some images of a beef classification guide. I don't remember what breed it was, that I think are fairly similar, but these are not official and they never were. Just use them as guidelines. So what you'll see there, though, we're a dual-purpose breed. We want muscling. We're not just all about dairy. We need some muscle in our animals to produce the good quality Dexter beef on an efficient animal on a smaller frame. So what you see there, you looking from the back, the width of the hindquarters, the depth of the hindquarters, and the roundness from the side, from the back. Rump angle, number 8 there is another. The numbers are different on here. But, rump angle from hooks to pins. The rump width, the width between the pins, very important. Style and balance. This is one of the areas that of the entire confirmation guide and classification is the most subjective, even for the professional classifiers, but it does relate to some of those breed type points that I was talking about. And just the, you can see there it says breed character, the dish face, the wide, broad muzzle, the wide, bright eyes. Those are breed character type traits. Masculinity and femininity, you hear that in the show ring a lot. Judges will be talking about, is this animal a little too coarse for my taste, or just the right amount of femininity? That's what we're talking about there. They clean through the neck. Do the females show of femininity? Presence and temperament. Obviously, temperament's something that we want to focus on as a Dexter breed. And I think most classifiers, most Dexter people can easily identify just in a walking environment the relative temperament, perhaps, of an animal based on their pose, their stance, their ear set, how nervous they are walking around, prancing, those types of things. So I don't know that you need a separate temperament confirmation tool to measure that. I think that's a fairly, are they all head up all the time? That type of thing. You're looking skeptical, Stephanie. Not all of it. We'll make sure I was on track. So that is one of the more subjective areas, but I think it's still able to be assessed well. Mobility, front legs. When viewed from the front, do they deviate? Are they toed out? Are they toed in? Are they set right? You'll notice on a lot of Dexters, toed out is the more common toe set in terms of, not overall, but if they're leaning one way or the other, they're more often toed out. Foot angle. What's the depth of the heel? And how does that relate to the foot angle? That's another trait that's looked at. So those are, I'm sorry, I moved into mobility. So the foot angle and the front legs are in the mobility. That's 25% of the score. Rear legs, exam from the rears, including hock, pasterns, and hoof. So are they posting? Are they straight up and down on those legs? Or are they set way back under? being simple home. The rear foot angle, again, what's the depth, the angle of the heel. Rear legs. I think this is another area if we're actually measuring, we see a lot of, we need some improvement in. I think we've got quite a few cowhawk Dexters out there. Movement and tracking. Examine how an animal tracks as it walks. You stand behind that animal and you're able to see is the front hoof tracking right in line with where he set its, the back hoof tracking right in line with where they set their front hoof. That's a good tracking animal. The better they track, the longer the longevity of the animal, the more they're going to be able to get around and eat forage. It's important for both bulls and females. And then the next set is the mammary system. So we have 4 udder attachment. Stephanie was given a good description of this yesterday in her talk on dual purpose traits. It's a long, smooth transition from that udder into the belly. You can see some images there of kind of a cut up udder. And based on the linear score, the breed wants those as smooth and tight in the front as we can possibly get them. Rear udder height, very good images there of what that's describing, and we'll show you some of that out in the ring. We want that udder to extend as high up to the vulva as possible. If you take a look at, if you're having trouble figuring out whether this is the case or not in some of your animals, not that I'm recommending or breeding for this, but go take a look at dairy animals. Their udder heights are incredible. I mean, just incredible. And if you ever want to know, okay, what am I shooting for? Not in terms of overall, but in terms of height of that udder, go take a look at some Dairy Breed Association websites. It's just incredible how high those udders are. Rear udder cleft, Stephanie also talked about this. We want to see that medial V. We want to see some partition between those udders, or between those quarters when we look from behind. We don't want to see just a flat, as you see on the left there, just a flat, no distinction whatsoever between the quarters. That's that medial ligament that's holding the udder up in the back. That's why that's important. The stronger that is in their second and third line of lactation, the better they're also going to be in their 15th and 16th lactation. Yes?
On the rear udder cuff, it's showing the teeth pointing in.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah, that might just be that's not what we were focused on that image, I think. Well, you want them pointed in some, and that's part of that, but that might be a little bit extreme. Do you see that, Stephanie? I think it's a little extreme.
Another thing, Jim, see, when you look at your heifers, you're looking at the rear to see how far up that bag's going to come or how far that's going to fill out. If you look at your heifers, you should see pleats. You're going to see XX skin back there.
Right, so Stephanie is saying even on heifers you can tell to some extent how high that rear udder is going to be by looking at the pleats of the skin. If that's way up underneath and you don't see any pleats and it's just smooth under the vulva, it's never going to be high. You need those skin pleats all the way up, and that's going to give you an indication of how high that udder is going to be when she's fresh. But thank you, Bebe. I think it's just a defect in that image. That's a little extreme in terms of their teeth placement. Teeth length. I think this is another area among some that, did I miss one? Teeth placement. Yeah, I did miss that.
Number 4.
Udder depth.
Udder depth, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we don't want our udders hanging below the hock. I mean, that's just, that was described yesterday. That's just asking for all sorts of injuries. And it's really hard to hand milk, which a lot of the milk do. It's just not good. And it indicates a breakdown in some of the attachments that's holding that udder up. Teeth placement, we want them, as you see from the ideal range there, in the shaded area, we want them just ever so slightly, if any, pointed out. but ideally, straight down would be good. Um, Teat length, I think we have some real work to do in this area. So you can see there, we don't want extremely small teats. We are a homestead breed, so that's, not a lot of people are going to be having machines. And Stephanie's demonstrating short teat milking. Two-finger milking. It's like that, who's milking cats in a movie? So yeah, we want them, we want the teats where they're, and we don't want them too long either. Again, because of injury, even on a high up udder, you're going to have more susceptibility to injury if they're really long teats. We want them a good medium size, and just right for most people to hand, a few fingers, not one or two. All right, so that's the mammary system, and then we go into bull reproductive system. And that's also, again, that's 25% of your bull score. But there's only really 4 areas that's assessed, that is assessed there. The scrotum and testicles. Well, before we even get to linear classification for cows makes a great ton of sense to me. I'm a little less enthusiastic about linear classification of bulls because what's important about a bull? Patty says what he can sire. Exactly. If I want to understand how good a bull is, I'm going to look at him second or third. I'm going to look at his sires first. His offspring. Yeah, his direct offspring are going to be what I'm going to look at first. And so to assess a bull, I think the best thing to do is to get a collection of his daughters together and see where they're at on these traits, or a collection of his I suppose you could do his sons. So I think there's value in it, but I think the real value in classification of bulls is through their daughters. So this is 25% of the bull that we're looking at here. All the other things apply to the bull, except for the mammary traits, so the form and substance and mobility, those things apply. So we're looking at the scrotum and the testicles. Are they as they should be? Are they properly shaped? Are they properly sized? Are they descended appropriately? You have one still up there. So you can read through that. And in the confirmation guide, there's actually an image that I didn't get in here that shows you exactly what, on the website, what an appropriate looking scrotum and testicles look like. Yes? Not that I'm aware of.
Can you repeat the question?
So the question was, is there a minimum recommended scrotal size for Dexters? If we don't, say again? Circumference. And that's part of a sire examination or a fertility examination. I don't know of any. Has anyone heard from their vet or had one? Do you have an idea, Patty? What do you use? So 37 meters minimum.
30 centimeters.
30 centimeters. 30 centimeters. And where do you measure that?
Scrotal circumference.
Right?
It's in the fullest part.
Right.
The vet measures it with a scrotal tape. And he measures the circumference on a 12-month-old bull. If it's not 30 centimeters or better, that's not a weak.
So 37?
30 centimeters.
30 centimeters. I'm sorry. 30 centimeters. At least. I'm sorry.
At the thickest or widest point, right?
Widest point, the vet will actually hold the scrotum when he measures it to make sure that both testicles are fully descended into the scrotum, and then he'll measure at the widest part.
At 12 months of age.
At 12 months is the minimum age.
And that's really when they should get their first BSE.
30 centimeters.
That's
So,
what we use.
right, so I don't, that was not included in the classification system developed in 2007. That's not in the confirmation guide now. That maybe that's something that could be added. And that's based on, I'm assuming, some data and research that indicates at 12 months of age for what your vet recommended.
That's desired for that breed.
Right.
We don't count.
But how did your vet determine 30 is the right?
Scaling it down, I think for Angus, the minimum is 34 centimeters, at 12 months. I mean, I've got a table that shows different breeds with different minimum scrotal circumference. Most of ours are bigger than that.
I would think you would want to do semen tests though before you start.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Much more
That's
important.
the only way you're gonna know what circumference. Will be the semen testing in their fetal circumference.
So as we move forward and perhaps develop a further or confirmation guide or classification system, that's something we'd want to look at. Do we want to identify what's the appropriate circumference of the scrotum? All right, the other areas on the boa reproductive system or the sheath should be moderately sized, held near the body, but not overly tight or restrictive. And we want that in the middle. We don't want it too restrictive, but we don't want it loose either. The penis, the bull should retract completely into the sheath while at rest, and inadequately extracted penis is subject to injury and infection. So, as you see on the linear scale, we don't want that at all. So it should be completely retracted. So that is, and in addition to just the traits that you look at, I think an important piece of you're doing a confirmation of your cattle or a professional doing classification of your cattle is also understanding, and I didn't put any slides together for this, but body condition is also important to know. And I heard someone say the other day, you know, the mark of a true cattle eye can see functional traits in an animal that is not properly is has not the appropriate body condition. So and then seeing through one that is over conditioned, what is really there. So these types of traits, looking at these types of traits, particularly as you develop your eye, and we use professionals to do this, they were able to do that much better than a lot of folks that are just looking at cattle for the first time. Being able to see what's really under an over-conditioned animal or an animal that needs a little condition, what's really there, and where would it be if it was properly conditioned. So I think that's all I had. That's an actual score sheet that was used. Here's some examples that we already went through. Oh, I started that. Okay. So, why is it, we talked some about this already. Why is it beneficial? It identifies strengths and weaknesses in a herd. Provides a clear description of each animal's strengths and weaknesses. So you get this score, you get this assessment on each animal. Allows the herds to benchmark animals within the breed. So I know when we're looking at some of the genetic testing and mapping stuff, Identity, who provides like the beef profiles, they have a benchmarking tool, and we were going to have Mark, I think, that was going to be one of our presenters yesterday, but he wasn't able to make it, and I haven't heard. But he has a software that can actually benchmark. Do you use it, Patty? Okay. So.
DeepSeek will do a report. They'll rank your animals according to score. You can even give them the criteria you want to focus on.
So you could, under a classification system, you could benchmark your animals with all other animals that have been classified potentially. That would be a benefit. And it helps you inform your breeding decisions about where you need to improve, where you're really strong at, that you don't want to go backwards on. And we talked some about this as well. It adds value to herds over time and increases breed stock value. Being able to tell someone that this cow has produced, or this bull has produced 5, 6, 7, X number classified animals at whatever number, and where their strength and traits are, is valuable in my mind to marketing a bull. You're able to tell a breeder where you think, given the best information you have, this animal is going to do well and improve on things that they want improving on, and areas where it might not do as well. So that's very valuable to add. And this gets back to Linda's question a little bit, and also Ryan's. Identify and define progress and trends in herd improvement over time. Where were all my cows classifying 5 years ago? Where are they classifying now? That's powerful information. Assist the breed and the association identify trends over time. So just as you as a herd would use this information to see where we're going, it would be beneficial for the association and the breed to know where our breed is going based on everybody's herd or anyone that classifies. And I talked about that starting off. It's just beneficial to have someone, an objective eye, come take a look at your animals and see what we're doing and see how they're doing. And we don't need to get into this, but you add up all those linear score points and animals are identified in one of these levels. That all can be worked out in the system, however that plays out. And I think that's all I have for the presentation. But I think, why don't we just open it up and talk a little bit, or do you just want to go look at an animal and walk through some of this? And one other thing, if anyone else has an animal here that they want someone, not me, but perhaps someone else to walk through a classification with, you can feel free to bring them up to the arena and we'll walk through it. I'm going to bring one up. If anyone else wants to bring an animal up, please do so. Yes, Susan.
I was wondering on the ones where you're measuring the width between the legs and that sort of thing, how do you account for a difference, like some Dexters that come out bigger than others? Bigger than others.
Is it proportion or an absolute?
And the same with the scrotum size. Hold out.
So Susan was asking about basically if you have a shorter framed animal, is the width.
Sounds promising.
So she was asking about, Susan was asking about on a shorter framed animal compared to a larger framed animal, how do you make those determinations in terms of width, like perhaps in muscling you were thinking about and looking for the rear?
Between the front legs.
So width of the front legs. Yeah, I think it is proportionate. I mean, is it on that animal? Does it look right? Is it at this width? It's not an absolute. The only really, I think, absolute measurement we have in here is the height. If we would add something like Patty was suggesting about scrotal circumference, that then would be an absolute measurement. But all the others are relative, but now I'm thinking about pin angle. That's a little bit, I think we could actually have a fairly good defined, objective measurement of that. What is that angle exactly that we want? And then also to some degree on the hoof angle. But does that get your question? So what other discussion topics, questions? We want to go look at some cows. Let's go look at some cows.